Hello everyone, I am the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today we've been able to get breaking news from around the entirety of the world, as we've been able to hear that significant actions have been conducted by the armed forces of Ukraine once again against the Russian Federation, launching drones throughout the entirety of the area, and also causing significant damage to other military, critical infrastructure, and war industry sites throughout the Russian Federation. At the exact same time, we've also been able to see a penetration air operation being conducted by an F-16 using GBU-39s to target and destroy a Russian barracks within the area of the Kursk Oblast. Meanwhile, outside of that and in Europe, or more so Eastern Europe, we've been able to hear that the Russian Federation is now painting Finnish naval exercises as an inflammatory escalation against the Russian country, although at the same time the Russian Federation is building up a large amount of Russian forces directly along the Finnish border and have been doing so for around a year at this time. Meanwhile, Polish citizens are beginning to abandon the Suwalki Gap in droves as they move out and into different areas of the country, suspecting or at least believing at this point, according to the Bild, a German newspaper, that a Russian invasion will most likely target it and attempt to close off the Suwalki Gap, leaving a lot of these people, if a potential invasion was to occur, under Russian occupation. The state of Germany, or the Federal Republic of Germany, has also stated that they are now backing and supporting Ukrainian deep strikes in the Russian Federation territory, as they believe that this is an important way for the Ukrainians to be able to bring the Russians to their knees and to further bring a resolution to the conflict. This is also coming at the exact same time as Germany has classified their arms shipments to the state of Ukraine and also are supposedly soon to provide Taurus missiles, making it all seem more likely that there is most likely a Taurus missile or several that are going to be in Ukraine or are already there. We have also been able to hear that the United States and NATO are going to be starting a new coordinated effort to stop Russian shadow tankers from violating sanctions and traveling throughout the world pretty much unscathed, as we have been able to hear that nearly 80% of all oil trade being done right now by the Shadow Fleet is being done with the People's Republic of China. And that does not mean that good fortune has reached the People's Republic of China, as a major chemical plant exploded in the Shandong province of the People's Republic of China earlier today in a significant explosion. Meanwhile, the Russian Federation also suffered another explosion as well at an ammo storage within the area of a far east oblast of the Russian Federation near to Vladivostok. We have also been able to hear out of the United States that apparently Nippon Steel, a major Japanese steel producer, will soon be purchasing the U.S. Steel Company at $55 a share. We have a very interesting and large amount of news today, and getting on into our most major pieces of news, we were able to hear that once again another major drone attack is ongoing right now against the Russian Federation, with video and picture evidence confirming that the skies of Russia are being lit up at this moment, both by drones impacting the ground as well as other drones eventually making their way to their targets. We see smoke rising from multiple impacts throughout Russia. We also hear another drone hitting right there. Moving on from that clip and on into our next one, we also were able to hear that the Russian Federation, in turn, has also been continuing to attack the Ukrainian state with hundreds of drones. And the state of Ukraine is now attempting to develop an advanced way to deal with these sorts of incoming air targets. Ukraine has developed a brand new weapon called the Sky Sentinel. And this is a picture of it right here. It is an incredibly simple system, and from what it appears, it looks like, at least on this mock-up, that may be a Browning 30 caliber machine gun that has been mounted onto the top of this turret, but nevertheless, it also appears, at least according to this information, that it may be an M2 Browning heavy machine gun, possibly with some sort of an air-cooled sleeve down the whole length of it, maybe an aviation-style sleeve, or there may also be the lack of a barrel further up the front, as it appears that they may have attached some sort of a testing system to test gauges and distance and also perfectly range find as well, but nevertheless, this is the system. The Sky Sentinel is an autonomous turret that is AI controlled, armed with a Browning M2 heavy machine gun with a circular field of action, meaning that it traverses on a turret. According to the developer, Sky Sentinel is capable of detecting and shooting down any target that is flying up to speeds of 800 kilometers an hour, meaning around approximately 450 miles an hour. The AI is trained to recognize birds and does not waste ammunition, quote, on Sparrows. The complex is autonomous and works in tandem with a radar. It receives targeting data, trajectory, and fires independently. The cost for the system is about $150,000 per individual unit. Currently, the Sentinel is still undergoing combat testing, but has already shot down 4 Shahed drones. The development team is currently working on mass production of drone units, dozens of units per month. And it does appear that this system may be a future of Ukrainian air defense. As air defense has evolved, as well as the way that other countries are able to attack each other through the air, we have seen that there needs to be a robust response to the kind of threat that can be posed by incoming drone attacks. Drones these days actually account for the majority of airspace violations and attacks that are occurring on both sides of the border in the Russian Federation and Ukraine at this point in the war. And it's making it incredibly clear that the cruise missile systems and the ballistic missiles of old are starting to become more and more obsolete, as while they do carry a large explosive yield, modern-day air defense systems have a fairly easy time shooting them down, meaning that nowadays it's not necessarily about having a smaller number of high-yield explosives inside of a small variety of longer-range missiles. It now seems that the modern day revolves around cheap drones with smaller explosive yields, but that can be fielded in the hundreds at a time, meaning that there is a higher chance that the enemy forces will run out of interceptors, ammunition, or may just not have enough personnel involved in air defense along with air defense guns and assets to be able to take down the drones, meaning that there actually is a higher success rate with a larger amount of cheap drones than there is with a smaller amount of expensive cruise and ballistic missiles. This means that these kinds of air defense systems are wildly important moving on into the modern warfighting space, as they will be able to defend the skies a lot more effectively than any other system. And not only that, it doesn't require the involvement of a large amount of personnel. Currently, with how the Ukrainians operate their air defense systems, usually they are operating truck-based technicals, which are trucks with a machine gun mounted into the back of the flatbed, and these are usually mounted either with a Dishka or a 50 cal or some other form of machine gun, sometimes getting as small as a PKP. Beyond that, however, these vehicles usually require a crew of 2 to 3 people, and usually also require an additional crew, a spotlight personnel that operate a large spotlight to be able to try and find these drones in the skies. With all that in mind, it does take up a massive amount of personnel, time, and equipment to be able to operate just a single air defense gun mounted onto a technical. With the Sky Sentinel, while it may still be truck-based and carried around by truck, meaning they'll need a crew member of it, well, a crew of at least 1 or 2, it is cutting down on the requirement to have a spotlight crew and also have that third crew member who actually serves as the gunner, meaning that this is cutting down on the amount of trained crew members that are needed to operate the system. And not only that, this largely is only held by the amount of units that can be produced, meaning that the Ukrainians can infinitely produce these sorts of systems, the Sentinels, to be able to cover their airspace in response to the Russians producing an infinite number of drones. This is a very effective system going forward, and we will expect that once this is rolled out into mass production, the Russian Federation's attacks against the state of Ukraine will start to become far less important. But outside of that, we have also been able to hear some major news in the meantime inside the People's Republic of China in the Shandong province, as a major chemical plant has exploded in the area, and not only that, it is actually the Shandong Yudao chemical complex, the world's largest producer of the pesticide chlorpyrifos, which is quite a significant one. It is used by multiple countries, dozens, if not hundreds, around the world. We were able to see that the facility appears to have had a silo that ruptured and violently exploded, which then resulted in the fire spreading and then pretty much catching the rest of the facility on fire. We can see the silo actually taking off there like a rocket, and moving on from that and into our next clip, we can also see other silos exploding here in this clip. You see the mushroom cloud that was created from these explosions. Of course, the toxicity of these kinds of fumes and the fires is quite high. We can also see another clip of it here showing the full scale of the explosion in mushroom cloud that occurred in this facility in the Shandong province. We can also see here in this last clip a duplicate of the one that we've seen prior, but nevertheless showing us that a significant explosion has occurred. We do not know the exact reason why the chemical plant suffered an explosion. Sabotage is almost entirely out of the picture. It is some sort of a workplace incident or some sort of a lack of safety procedures that led to the explosion here at this chemical plant. Nevertheless, it is one of the world's largest producers of chemical components for agriculture, and it may start to cause larger issues for a decent amount of developing and developed countries for them to be able to access or use significant amounts of fertilizer as this plant is offline. Nevertheless, moving on from that and into the eastern area of the Russian Federation, we also got to see a significant fire at the 304th Ammunition Depot of the 35th Army that was on fire in the Amur Oblast. We were able to see this fire on film right here, and NASA firm satellites were able to confirm that this facility was in fact on fire, and this was not dated information. This is the actual ammunition facility right here inside the Amur Oblast. It is a somewhat sizable one, but not as big as the Grau arsenals inside of Western Russia, and we can also see confirmation here that a fire has spread over most of the ammunition facility, and it does appear that it may have spread a little bit beyond it as well in subsequent major explosions as the ammunition went up. Beyond that, it appears that explosions are something that is quite commonly happening, at least in Asia over the course of the day, with explosions happening in the two largest countries in the region, the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China. But this isn't stopping an explosion for the large part on the Russian Federation's end, at least diplomatically, as the Russian Federation has returned to the idea of dismantling the entire Ukrainian government before the war ends, with Sergei Lavrov saying that they will not tolerate the Ukrainian regime having control over a single Ukrainian citizen by the war's end, meaning that they're going to keep this war going until they take over largely the entirety of the country. They're back to that statement again. And here's the statement specifically from Lavrov.
Мы не можем оставить людей под властью того режима, который сейчас там находится. И если правительство, так называемое, хунта, по большому счету, Зеленского, если они рассчитывают на то, что каким-то образом будет достигнута договоренность о прекращении боевых действий, и то, что останется от Украины, будет жить по тем законам, которые они напринимали, это иллюзия. Этого допустить нельзя ни в коем случае.
Now we can see that the Russians didn't just say that they wanted about half of Ukraine like they were saying a couple of days ago. Now they're wanting the entire Ukrainian government dismantled and under Russian control for the large part is now what they're saying. And it does appear that the Russian Federation is going to keep the war going at this point as long as they can, as much as they can, as long as they're able to continue to deceive the West or specific people in the West that peace is an actual achievable thing with the Russians and pretty much keep everyone in roundabout cycles chit-chatting about peace but never actually getting to it. And this is also on top of even more interesting issues that we've been seeing that is showing that the Russians are continuing to escalate not only with Ukraine, but with the West to try and achieve these goals. They have now declared that Finnish naval exercises are an inflammatory instrument of NATO escalation near the Russian border, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry through Sergei Lavrov. We have also seen that the fear of the Russian Federation starting a greater war with Eastern Europe as a result of their expansionist ambitions inside of Ukraine has led plenty of Polish people to leave the Suwalki Gap, as we've been able to hear that according to the German newspaper Bild, that residents of the Suwalki Gap on the border of Poland and Lithuania have started to leave the region en masse, fearing a possible conflict with Russia, according to the newspaper. And we've also been able to hear as well that the United States and NATO, while largely putting up a fairly weak front against the Russians to the point that citizens are truly scared in the Suwalki Gap, and the Russians feel bold enough to claim that Finnish naval exercises within their own territorial waters are an aggressive act against the Russian Federation, we have been able to see, at least recently today, that they are starting a new coordinated effort to be able to try and put a better foot forward against the Russians with the sanctions that have been implemented so far, as the US and EU have ceased joint efforts to combat Russian sanctions evasion, and this collapse of transatlantic coordination weakens pressure on Russia and risks undermining the global sanctions regime that helps to defend Ukraine. China is responsible for around 80% of the evasion, with most shadow tank Shadow Fleet tankers making their way to the People's Republic of China, but it does appear that NATO and the United States are now going to be making larger joint coordinated efforts to be able to try and deal with the situation at the moment. We have also been able to hear inside of the state of, well, not really the state of Ukraine, but in the Russian Federation, that an F-16 actually penetrated Russian airspace today, at least to some extent, and actually was able to drop GBU-39 glide bombs onto the Russian Federation's armed forces inside of the Kursk Oblast. We can actually see one of those F-16s flying over in the film right there, and we can now see the GBU-39s impacting the facility inside of the Kursk Oblast successfully. We can see the Russians running around in circles down there, actually running out, and we can now see more GBU-39s hitting more Russian positions inside of Kursk. That's the end of that clip, but still a very interesting thing to note that the Ukrainian armed forces have been using the F-16s for offensive actions against the Russian Federation inside of Russian territory. Moving on from all of this and on over into some of our last bits of news here inside the United States, we have been able to hear of something that's quite interesting that I wanted to bring up to all of y'all that I think actually would be against U.S. national security interests. This has been blocked multiple times in the past, and I will be a little bit more transparent about statements and names. Of course, this channel doesn't pick politics, but I will be making a general statement about the situation. We have been able to hear that recently the plan or idea for Nippon Steel, the major Japanese steel producer, to buy U.S. steel is once again moving forward, as Nippon is expected to buy U.S. steel at $55 a share. Now, this is something that usually we wouldn't bring up. It almost is within domestic news, but it is world news in a sense, considering that a foreign company will be buying out U.S. steel. This is something that I actually have to say the U.S. government is well within its right to block the sale of, as we have seen multiple times in the past under prior Trump and Biden administrations, that the purchase of by Nippon Steel of U.S. steel has been blocked, largely for national strategic reasons. And I know a lot of people will be saying, well, the state of Japan is an ally of the United States. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense to treat them as an adversary and stop Nippon Steel from acquiring U.S. steel. But there is a very important reason. While Japan is an ally, it is an external force or an external member of the United States at that point that is purchasing a producer of a strategic asset, which is steel. Steel production is an incredibly important thing for a modern nation to be able to have direct control over, instead of having it controlled by an outside third party, even if that third party is an ally. I would largely say that the United States of America should block the sale of U.S. steel to Nippon Steel, but at the same time, there also needs to be a new approach taken to steel production inside the United States. U.S. steel is doing poorly economically, and that's largely due to the situation that has arisen from producing steel inside the United States, which is usually produced at such a high cost that it is generally not competitive in a global market. If this is the case, but the United States of America also needs to retain its strategic production of steel, of course, there's a little bit of a caveat to that as well, which I'll be throwing in, I believe that the United States government should move forward with possibly subsidizing the operations of U.S. steel, so that way we can see that American-made steel is still manufactured well into the future at the numbers it's currently being made at. So that way, if and when a situation arose that the United States would need access to American steel only, we still will have these major steel manufacturers inside of the country and ready to produce this sort of product. At the same time, though, the purchase of U.S. steel by Nippon Steel wouldn't be the largest hit to the country that's been seen so far, as U.S. Steel isn't even the largest manufacturer of steel products inside the United States. That actually would be Nucor Steel, which uses a large amount of mini mills throughout the country to be able to produce the amount of steel that they do. U.S. Steel largely still produces a decent amount of steel in its original steel works in places like Gary, Indiana, which you can see right here, one of the large steel mills that U.S. Steel still does operate. But beyond that, however, I would have to stress the importance to folks here on the channel that while we aren't directly involved in governmental operations, I believe that American steel manufacturers should remain American owned, so that way the United States government holds direct control in an emergency situation, and the United States of America as a country holds direct control over our steel manufacturing in a state of national emergency or in a crisis such as the outbreak of a major conflict, where steel will become a very important kind of a commodity to be produced directly inside of the United States and then manufactured manufactured into its final products within the borders of the country. Nevertheless, that is just something I wanted to bring up as an aside. It's something that I consider to be quite important to national security and strategic interests, but still, that is just my opinion. Nevertheless, that is the end of the news that we have today. And I've got to thank all of y'all so much once again for watching so far. And if y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We would love to see y'all like, comment, and subscribing, and we love to see new people joining the Enforcer channel and the community of the channel, which is called the LSA, which stands for the Lee Spring Army. Also, if you have enjoyed up till this point, please make sure to put Shandong in the comment section below. That is SHANDONG. And please make sure to put that in the comment section below if you made it to this point in the video, so that way we know that you have actually watched the entire thing from beginning to finish. I would like to see that. Also, if you really enjoyed the channel and you would like to help us to keep this thing running, please make sure to support us on Patreon. The folks who are over there supporting us on Patreon right now help this channel to be possible and help us to make sure that we're able to put out the news to y'all each and every single day. And so a massive thanks to all of those folks, and once again, you can find the Patreon in the link in the description below if you want to support the channel. But nevertheless, I thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.